Mr. Root, thank you. Thank you for your personal service to this country and for the strength to be able to offer that statement and be here today. And God bless you. Between yourself and Ms. Hartling, thank you for sharing your stories. We'll now recognize Chief Burbank for 5 minutes.
To begin, I would like to say to the Hartling family and the Root family that I am sincerely sorry for your loss. You deserve much better, the tireless effort of law enforcement and the love of your communities. Committee members, we are experiencing a modern transformation of our world and especially of our nation. Demographics, cultures, economies, and public expectation are evolving rapidly. Interconnection of the globe through technology and the migration of people is a dynamic driver of change. Modern immigration has introduced cultural, religious, and intellectual diversity, creating avenues for multicultural competitiveness. Robust scientific evidence indicates that immigrants contribute economically, improve the local tax base, stabilize economy, and drive down crime, whether they move lawfully or unlawfully into new communities. Some of the highest immigrant-populated cities have experienced the steepest declines in crime. Coincidentally, this dramatic change has also marked an increase in bias, inequity, vitriol, and fear. Immigrants are ever increasingly stereotyped and demonized inappropriately for their involvement in criminal activity. Research conducted over the past 30 years has consistently shown that immigrants are less likely to commit serious crimes or to be incarcerated. This holds true whether documented or undocumented and regardless of their country of origin. It is a fact, as undocumented immigration has increased, crime has decreased dramatically. There is no demonstrable correlation between immigrants and crime. Additionally, there is no documented relationship between enhanced immigration enforcement and reduced crime. Public policy must be driven by evidence and not anecdotes. We have demonstrated that enforcement, arrest, incarceration, and force are not the most effective tools to prevent crime. A case in point, as incarceration rates soared in the 90s, so did police officers, search warrants, and other enforcement activities. We were at war against drugs, against gangs, and yet violent crime increased. The lasting legacy of this period was not crime reduction, but rather historically high incarceration rates, zero-tolerance approaches, stop-and-frisk practices, and the over-incarceration of individuals of color for misdemeanor violations, harming our communities far more than helping. In fact, the mistrust of communities of color that we face today is a result of hard-on crime, indifferent enforcement tactics perpetrated on neighborhoods labeled high crime. People experience their lives within neighborhoods, rarely at a national, state, or even city level. This is especially evident in socioeconomically depressed communities. Effective and appropriate policy and practices must understand and address life issues: education, health, housing, safety, and transportation. Public safety as exercised through community policing is best accomplished at a local level, capable of a nimble, small government approach to addressing these life issues. Immigration enforcement has created a double standard wrought with constitutional concerns. Immigrants not only face potential criminal penalty, but excessive detention without due process and ultimately deportation. Immigration enforcement can only be accomplished through racial profiling. Immigrants have been stopped for pretext traffic violations, questioned about their status, detained for numerous days without probable cause, transferred to the custody of ICE, and deported without notification to their families. This most certainly does not represent equal treatment under the law. Recidivism rates hover around 67% for individuals incarcerated. Conversely, persons adjudicated within a restorative justice model, designed to be an alternative to incarceration, reoffend at a rate less than 40%. Education or knowledge about society, social norms, laws, and traffic codes gained through participation and inclusion is the way out of addiction, substance abuse, and misdemeanor crime. When communities or groups of people are afraid to participate, we systematically isolate them, creating a negative environment where success is difficult, if not impossible. Studies have shown that immigration enforcement is not viewed as a legitimate public safety tool and does not serve to enhance community well-being, but further divides communities and undermines the already difficult job law enforcement has of maintaining public trust. Throughout history, law enforcement has been an efficient tool of social oppression. directed to protect certain races against the symbolic threats of others. We are still working to repair the mistrust, resentment, and rage that many in our communities continue to feel. It is not surprising that law enforcement officials across the nation are troubled at the proposition of mandatory immigration enforcement practices that appear motivated by prejudice and are likely to result in an increased crime. The time has come to accomplish comprehensive immigration reform. We must bring millions of people residing in our neighborhoods, contributing to our economy, adding value to our lives, out of the shadows and into mainstream. Crime prevention is best accomplished when we are partners in the effort with all members of society. Just as we have been unable to incarcerate our way out of crime, we will never solve immigration issues through deportation. Thank you.
We got a lot to talk about, Mr. Burbank, because I think you are in totally the wrong planet. But we're going to get after that. There is a vote on the floor. And so our apologies for this panel. But the committee is going to recess. We have 3 votes. And then we will come back and resume the questioning portion of this. So committee will stand in recess and will reconvene no sooner than 1:30. Thank you. Sorry, that's just, we never know what they're going to call votes. We'll come back. Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will return to order, and we'll start the questioning portion. We have excused Ms. Hartling, but we will continue now with the questioning part, and we will start with the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Heiss, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank each of you for being here. And your stories are extremely moving, and our hearts go out to you. I spoke yesterday with the Sheriff of Gwinnett County, which is the second most, is number 2 in terms of criminal aliens being dropped off, second only to Harris County, Texas. And he heads law enforcement, of course, in the county. In fact, he informed me that, as I just mentioned, that it's number 2. Chief Martin, as a 40-year veteran of law enforcement, I'm hoping you might be able to shed some light on some of the questions from your own experience, your knowledge. When an illegal alien is released, are you notified?
No, sir.
By anyone?
We are not notified by anyone.
Okay, so we heard testimony this morning that ICE notifies the states of all those who are released, and then that information filters down. And you're saying that that is not the case?
We do not receive any direct communication from ICE. The only way we would know if somebody was released is if, what they talked about earlier, the victim would be notified, and if they filled out a form, then the local sheriff's department is supposed to notify us if they're released so that we can talk to the victim.
Okay, so the law enforcement notification system, is it working?
No, sir.
What is it doing? If it's not working, what is the value, if any?
Well, I have to take you back years ago when INS or ICE used to have their agents in all the county jails. I think by reason, I'd like to preface my remarks by saying that most municipal police departments don't hold their prisoners at the police departments. They book them into the county jails so the sheriffs would have the authority to keep them. Now, Santa Maria, we arrested 6,000 people last year, and we would keep them, we would book them into our custody, and then within about 6 to 8 hours we would transfer them to the sheriff's department. And what we do at that point is we do fill out a pretrial service, and about 3/4 at the bottom of the page It says, does the police officer request an immigration review? And in the case of Victor Martinez, we checked yes. So that's about the only time that we have the ability to communicate with ICE to have a review done. Now that the ICE does not have officers in the county jails full time, they just show up in the morning. They'll look at the scrolls or the gate book, if you will. But that really doesn't serve any purpose because many times they'll bail out the night before. So it's not working.
Is it true that when a criminal alien is released from prison on parole, that officers, local law enforcement, have to be assigned to check on them?
No, we're not assigned to check on them at all. In fact, when they're released from either the county jail or, say, a state prison, they're taken by ICE to a processing center and then down to Los Angeles where they're supposed to be released. They never release them from the prisons. They always do it down in Los Angeles.
So how does the parole work? I mean, does the state assign someone to watch over them?
Well, pretty much the state of California has gotten rid of almost all of their parole. It's all become localized for the probation department, which is really not equipped to deal with it. So the state has gotten rid of their funding for parole and pushed it down to the local level.
But you're saying local level is not handling it?
No, we're not being notified of any of it.
So what's happening to these people? There's no parole, no accountability, no. They're not watched at all?
I think if they're watched, it's in our county, in Santa Barbara County, it'd be by the local probation department.
Okay, so how do they get involved? Who is, at what point, in other words, when these people are released and put on parole, who's looking after them and how's that process work?
It would just be a county probation officer who's assigned the case, and he may or she may see them once a month or maybe never.
Okay, well then who is paying for it? The local parole officers getting who's paying?
Yeah, Congressman, in the county, it's actually the probation department's county probation.
So the taxpayers are paying this?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we have ICE that's responsible for releasing these people that should be deported, but in many cases no one's looking out for them. But when there are cases that a parole officer, in other words, your local county is having to pick up the tab for the lack of work being done by ICE. Is that a fair assessment?
That would be a fair assessment. And not only that, we're having to pay for all of the investigations that result of us arresting these people. And the local district attorney's office is also having to pay to prosecute. And then once they're found guilty, they have to go to a state prison. If it's a state crime, so either the local, the county, or the state is paying for all of that.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate this, but I'm shocked we have a conflict in testimony from what we heard earlier from Ms. Saldana saying that all the states are being notified and it's filtering down, and that obviously is not taking place, at least in your case. And I think this needs some further research and investigation. Thank you. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. We'll recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for holding this hearing. I thank the ranking member as well. Like all of the other members before me, I just want to say to the victims' families, thank you for your courage and your willingness to come forward and try to make sure that this does not happen again. And Mr. Martin and Mr. Burbank, thank you as well for your participation. Ms. Hartling, can I ask you the contact that you have had with any federal law enforcement, or can you tell me if they have been? I'm trying to explore the communication between federal agencies and victims such as yourself and families. Could you tell me a little about that? Has any of that gone on?
No, I have not heard from the federal government or Homeland Security or
ICE.
Nothing. No, but no, not Congressman Blumenthal. He had got things rolling pretty good for Casey's case when I saw him in Hartford last year. So I know for a fact that Homeland Security is investigating Jean Jacques' case, my daughter's case.
Right, right.
And we're just waiting for the report.
Okay. Mr. Martin, could you tell me about the contact that your department has on a regular basis with ICE? Do they inform you when there's, there could be somebody in your jurisdiction that is, under a deportation order, or is there any communication going on between your department?
We do have some limited communication with ICE. Recently, Homeland Security did build an ICE facility in Santa Maria, and it was...
And you're north of L.A., between L.A. and...
Yeah, we're between Los Angeles and San Francisco.
Okay, yeah.
However, it is not a detention center. It is simply a processing center. So when they go, and I'm referring to ICE, when they pick up people maybe who have done their time in a state prison or a county jail, they will take them to that processing center for a few hours, and then by van take them down to either Oxnard or to Los Angeles. So the center is there, but it's only open during the day, and it's just simply a processing center.
That's it?
Yes, sir.
And tell me a little bit, I know in some of your testimony, there's a description of decriminalization of possession of heroin.
Yes.
Meth, others. How has that played into your ability to do your job in this respect?
All across California, it has increased property crimes over 20%. So we're seeing an increase there. We're seeing an increase in homelessness. And many of these, some of these people are illegal aliens who are living on the streets. So when they passed that law, Prop 47, it really took our ability away to force them into a court or to force them even into rehabilitation or probation.
I see. All right. Well, again, Ms. Hartley and Mr. Root, very sorry for your... Mr. Root, do you have anything else you want to add to that in terms of any contact with ICE or federal authorities, or their inability or unwillingness to do so?
I had one gentleman from ICE when we were dealing with the Omaha Fugitive Task Force by the name of Jake, and he was 100% great, trying to give me some information. He had if they catch this killer of my daughter, the sheet where if they tell her where he has hearings, that type of stuff. And he was going to hand carry it out and have me fill it out. And whoever his superior is did not want that to happen, and it came in the mail. And I just asked him, I said, doesn't he want to deal with me? They dropped the ball again.
Yeah.
And then probably about a month later, I'm trying to get some answers. I had some contact numbers from Jake up to the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, and a couple of his supervisors called back, and basically it was just general information about the same thing as Sarah Sedania. And then 2 days before I came here, Sarah's advisor had called, said she wanted to reach out to me. I told him I wasn't interested, and a day or two later, I wanted to know after the testimony, and I said, no. I mean, what part of no don't you get? No means no. Yeah. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your testimony. I see my time has expired. Again, I thank the witnesses.
Thank you.
I yield back.
Thank you. We'll go to the gentleman now from Florida, Mr. DeSantis, the chairman of the Subcommittee on National Security. We'll recognize him for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the witnesses. You have my sympathies. This is just a terrible thing. And the thing is what really gets me, it was preventable. Had our government simply done its job, its core duties, you guys would have your loved ones here today. And I appreciated, Ms. Hartling, in your testimony pointing out that this is happening across our country. And I was in law enforcement at the time as a prosecutor, and if it's just some random American commits a crime, we want to prevent it. But when you have somebody in custody and you release them, whether they're early released as a criminal in the normal justice system, or here, in this case, people who are here illegally and don't have a right to be here and have committed crimes, you are putting the public at risk. And so it's just very, very frustrating. And I was disappointed in Director Saldana trying to say this is just political banter. It's not political banter. These are lives that are at stake, and this is a government that's not fulfilling its duty. What was your view, Ms. Hartling? I mean, when you hear that being dismissed as political banter, how did that make you feel?
I couldn't believe it. Let's put it that way. I found it hard to believe that that came up.
Mr. Root, how did you feel about that?
I don't know how you can be so incompetent and still keep your job.
Good one.
What about the excuses that you hear? Well, we got a lot of factors to consider, or this or that. How does that make you feel?
That's the worst part, because I know in my heart and my family and everybody that loved Casey that I forgot where I was going with this. What was your question again?
Well, just when you hear the different excuses about why we can't do this, or this, but we have to release people, how does that make you feel?
That's just that's the first time I said Casey was killed last June. When I heard that he was an illegal alien and he was supposed to be deported 3 times, I said to myself, I said out loud, I want to make it to Washington, D.C. one day. And I did, and I'm very happy about that, because it is, I don't see anything happening, any changes happening, you know, with our deportation rules and enforcement of them. You know, so this doesn't happen. I mean, he was supposed to be deported 3 times, and he got let go the same day. The last time, before he killed Casey, he was let go the day he got out of prison, and ICE had him and let him go that exact same day. So it's very frustrating.
How about you, Mr. Root?
Well, several times I've seen her hold the book up. I think, you know, it comes down to common sense, you know. I mean, in my case, you got a homicide. You got to let that person go with priors? Are you nuts? Just common sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think that showing a statute book that says these are mandatory removals does not then mean anything not in there means you should remove them. You still have the authority, or that you should let them go. You still have the authority to hold people, and when the public safety is at risk. And the frustrating thing is that and maybe we do need to do some reform in the Congress, but a lot of this, there are tools available right now that the executive branch isn't using. I mean, if some of these countries aren't taking these folks who've committed crimes, we have things that we can do through the State Department. They've never attempted that one time, not once.
Right.
And so basically we're going to continue to see, and the list of criminal offenses that you see, then this is what ICE gives us. And it's really startling to see the type of things. So these are all, in every instance, people that are not here lawfully. And you have sex assault, kidnapping, homicide, arson. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible list, and I feel for you. We on the committee, on the subcommittee, on the full, we think it's a very important issue. We're going to continue to do what we can do. If that means legislative changes, we need to do it. But the executive branch has got to take this seriously. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Cartwright, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Root, thank you for your testimony. And
you bet.
I did want to follow up with you because we were talking about your daughter's case earlier. And I didn't realize that you're passing a petition against the judge who set the bail so low.
Yes, sir.
For the killer. And what I read from news reports, and I want to get your take on it because
Sure.
You can't always trust the news. It said that the prosecuting attorney, the Douglas County attorney, admitted that it could have been handled better, and that basically we were dealing with an offender who had committed previous offenses and who had skipped out on court appearances on previous occasions. Am I getting that right?
That is correct. I believe he was going the wrong direction on a street before. I think he didn't have a child's seat belted in, and a couple other. He had 2 other times where he was supposed to show up for court and he did not.
So my colleague
Prior to my daughter's death.
Right. Right. And my colleague, Mr. Gowdy, pointed out, and he was a prosecutor for many years, is there's really only 2 issues in front of a judge when you're setting bail: is danger to the community and probability of a flight risk. Well, here's a guy that had exhibited not the probability but the certainty that he would be a flight risk, and then add to that he was an undocumented illegal immigrant. That's like walking into court with a stamp on your forehead that says, I am a flight risk, incarcerate me at a very, very high bail. And so I see, you know, I can see being mad at the judge, but it sounded like the prosecution didn't lay that out, according to the news reports. Were you there for that?
I was not. I mean, I don't know what was communicated. You know, when he got his bond, we were actually burying my daughter, you know, so we didn't go to the pre-trial. I had spoke with Officer Swanson. Both of them, a lot of them officers I dealt with day and night shift daily, and they took it real personal. I mean, they all did their job. To me and my family, you know, whatever you do for your job, whether you're a judge, ICE, whatever you should be accountable for what you do. You know, if I'm a pipe fitter, if I put in pipe, it falls down and kills somebody or it leaks, I don't have a job.
Right.
So from my understanding is they're saying he didn't have all the information, but he didn't ask for it either. But with the name Ezwin Mejia and having a homicide, maybe wouldn't you want to do some legwork? He was in jail for 4 days. You wouldn't do some research on him before you just hurry up and set the bond instead of just running him through?
Right. Do you fault the county attorney for not putting that information in front of the judge?
I would say yes, too. Yes, I mean, it's at all levels, you know, city level, federal level, yes.
Well, again, thank you for being here.
You bet.
Hopefully we do learn something
You
from
bet.
all of this.
I'm sorry, the same judge had a bond of $2 million, too. It's just last week when my ex-wife, Michelle, was here. Same judge.
Ms. Hardling, again, thank you as well for being here. The man who killed your daughter unquestionably should have been deported. That is why ICE put him on the deportation list, but as we know, that didn't happen. And you deserve an answer as to why
Yes,
it
yes,
didn't happen.
I do.
November 24 last year, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Murphy, and Representative Courtney, who you heard from here today, wrote a letter to the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General. There are inspectors general that serve as watchdogs over federal agencies, asking for an investigation. And in that letter, the members wrote, and I quote, "It appears that ICE could and should have taken simple additional steps that might have resulted in Jacques being repatriated and therefore never given the opportunity to murder Casey Chadwick." Ms. Hartling, I assume that you support that letter.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And on January 12, the Inspector General sent a memo to ICE announcing that they had agreed to this request and were initiating the investigation. Were you aware of that?
I knew that the investigation is still ongoing.
Okay. So since then, we on the committee have obtained some additional details about your case, and the information indicates that Haitian officials repeatedly said they would accept Mr. Jacques, and then they reversed their decisions over and over again at the last minute. In fact, in one instance, these Haitian officials even approved a manifest that had Mr. Jacques listed to board a flight to Haiti, but they pulled it back at the last minute, and that happened October 10, 2012.
Right.
And you were familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay. So the letter from Senator Blumenthal, Senator Murphy, and Representative Courtney also asked the Inspector General to examine what could be done, quote, to overcome the objections of the Haitian government to the removal of this individual. And I assume you support this part of the investigation as well.
Yes.
Well, again, thank you all for being here, and my time is up, so I have to yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Walker, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today is about 6 names, what it boils down to. The name of Marilyn Ferris, Sarah Ray Ann Root, Casey Chadwick, and the people who took their lives, Victor Ramirez, Edwin Mejia, and Jean Jaquez. Now, what I'm impressed with is, Ms. Hartling, Mr. Root, you're willing to relive this situation over and over again. Many questions that I'm sure you don't want politicized or exploited. Yet at the same time, Mr. Root, Ms. Hartling, I've got the same question. What is it that drives you to keep fighting for your lost loved one? Why are you doing this?
Well, if it changes the life of one person, it's worth it. You know, I know if you don't say nothing and do nothing, nothing gets done. You got to be vocal on what you want to do and how you feel. I was brought up that way, and that's how I feel. My whole family's that way.
So whatever the sacrifice is, you're
Doesn't
willing
make
to
a
take on?
difference. What do you live for? Your kids, don't you?
Absolutely.
I have 1 kid left.
Thank you, Mr.
My only
Root.
daughter.
Ms. Hartling?
Yes, I agree exactly with what he said. Casey should still be here. There's no doubt about that. She should still be here. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't belong to a group that nobody wants to join. And I'm glad that he's guilty. He was convicted.
Sure.
So that's a big relief. But having to go over it and over it in your head.
Well, I compliment the strength that you guys are exhibiting. Chief Martin, for you to take up the calls. Of course, congratulations December as far as being appointed full-time chief there. And a lot of that's due to your many years of experience. I've done a little reading on your background. Very impressed with the background for what you did with the Sheriff's Department and the gang-related stuff that you've been fighting this fight for a long time. So you've seen it firsthand. I was very impressed that you're willing to call it out what it is. I believe that you made a quote that said, I think this is a national issue. I think it starts in Washington, D.C. with this administration that we see and their policies. I think you can draw a direct line over to Sacramento with the policies. And you talk about the AB 109, Prop 47, and you made this quote. You said, and I'm not remiss to say that from Washington, D.C. to Sacramento, there's a blood trail into the bedroom of Marilyn Ferris. You still believe that?
I do, sir.
Can you expound just for a moment why? Why do you feel that way? Why are you that passionate about it?
Well, you know, we on the local level are really feeling the total brunt of all this. You know, we talk about the national, we talk about the state, but, you know, it's every police officer that goes to all these crime scenes. And it just sunk in that this was so, as I stated earlier, preventable. He was arrested 6 times in 15 months.
15 months.
In 15 months. Yeah. And it's catch and release, catch and release. All right, now, if they're misdemeanors, and there are 2 of those are felonies, and they're dumbed down to a misdemeanor, I still think ICE ought to look at those cases and say, okay, he might have, you know, went and said, I'll go ahead and take the misdemeanor plea bargain.
Right.
But I think we ought to look at the original case and what it is, if it's a felony.
Of course. Yep. What does it do to the morale of the good men and women that you lead when they see this kind of situation where they are working, putting themselves in danger 6 times out of 15 months? Speak to that, if you would, please.
Well, the Santa Maria Police Department's a great police department, and hired 40 new police officers in the last 3.5 years. They're dedicated, they come to work every day, and I just think they realize that something needs to be done at a higher level. They all need that.
And you know that by sticking your neck out like this, you're going to get all kinds of innuendos and name-calling and everything else. I commend you for being willing to fight this fight, because I think it's going to make a difference in the future, all of you. I had several questions. I may have time for one. I at least want to get to it for Mr. Burbank. Mr. Burbank, do you agree with the job Director Saldana is doing at the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Department?
The system is broken on both ends.
Does she have a responsibility of some of the decisions that she's making?
Absolutely.
Okay. I've got a specific question for you. Is you previously testified before the House Judiciary Committee in opposition to a bill that would make criminal alien drunk driving deportable. How do you explain that? And I'm not trying to add histrionics to this case today, but how do you explain this to families that shouldn't be to that level of criminal offense?
The criminal offense should be equal under the law. So if you are a citizen, if you are a visitor to the country, or if you are undocumented in the country, they should have the same due process that anyone is entitled to in the United States. And that's what I firmly believe in my job.
But see, that's a flawed argument. I heard that today. He said, listen, aliens don't have as many criminal background or acts as the normal population. My point is, if they wouldn't here to begin with, there'd be no criminal acts from them. Is that not true? Thank you. I yield back. That's the end of my time. Thank you for your time. Appreciate that.
Now I recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings.
What were you going to say?
I was just going to say we've identified many flaws within the criminal justice system that are not necessarily directly related to immigration status.
Okay. As I said to you, Ms. Hartling, and to you, Mr. Root, I really do thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And, you know, the government printing office prints the records of these hearings. And, you know, one of the things that I noticed about myself, and sometimes you can learn stuff about yourself when you go through stuff, is that I never wanted anybody to forget my nephew. You know, I didn't want him to be like a flash, and then it's like he didn't exist. And since a record is being made here, that is a permanent record. I wanted to give you an opportunity to say anything special about your loved ones. Ms. Otley?
Oh, now?
Yeah, you.
Oh, Casey was a spitfire. Everybody loved her. She was a tiny little thing, and
Was she like you?
yes, she's like me, except she's
How did
not.
I guess?
She's not as tall though. She was very short. I have two daughters that are 5'1". That's Casey and my oldest, and my other daughter is 17. She's as tall as me, but all my other two daughters are short. So, but Casey wouldn't put up with any wrongdoings or anything. Casey she was a fighter, and that's why she had so many defensive wounds on her and everything, because she fought back. And but she was great. We talked every single day. I talked or text. She talked or texted me every single day. If there was a car accident on the highway, because I'm a lousy driver, she'd call me on the phone and to make sure that it wasn't me in the accident every time. I would sometimes I just answer the phone and I'm home, Casey. It wasn't me. So she was just a very caring, loving, 25-year-old beautiful girl with her whole life ahead of her, and now she's gone.
You know, you said something that kind of caught my ear, and you said you after it happened, you wanted to come to Washington.
Yes.
And you said these words. You said it made me happy to be able to come.
Yes.
Can you? Sometimes I think we who sit in these chairs don't realize the significance of these kinds of moments. Can you explain to me why you said that? Because
I felt that I could contribute my story about my daughter and how he was supposed to be deported 3 times, and so ICE and the federal government need to. I wanted to just say what I wanted to say, that it was wrong, and they need to have more steps to take, or whatever they do to detain an illegal alien who did a heinous crime. So he obviously had already done that before Casey. He was acquitted of killing one guy, and he attempted murder the guy's girlfriend. So he was already he was already a criminal. And when he got out of jail, and when I found out that ICE let him go the same exact day, I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
One of my favorite sayings is that out of pain comes one's passion to do their purpose.
Exactly.
Pain, passion, purpose. Mr. Root, can you tell us about your?
Well, my daughter, a lot like Mrs. Hartling's daughter. She was small, but she was a little spitfire. You always knew where you stood with her, just like my whole family, being vocal. But she was very loving, very smart, very beautiful, very caring. She was passionate and willing to help people all the time. She was, like I said, she just graduated with 4.0. And then she worked at Walgreens, too, while she wanted to continue her master's. And then people, need something. She was always willing to help somebody, at the drop of a dime. It's just a good-hearted person, Enjoyed doing a lot of family things, hunting and fishing. She was going to hunt this year with me. She goes, Dad, you're going to be pissed when I shoot one bigger than you. So I bought her a shotgun, and, them aren't in the cards. But, she just was... she was real active in soccer when she was younger. She used to go fishing with me, be on the boat for not catching no fish. She'd want to steer, and just a real joy, We never ever had problems with either one of our kids. It's just, it's a lot to swallow in, but I'll see her again, and, you don't want your kids to die in vain, and you got to speak up for what you believe in. And it's hard to do, but myself and my family, like I said, feels from from the local to the federal level. You know, the ball's been dropped everywhere, and everybody should be held accountable. Until my baby girl gets justice, I'll be here.
You know, there's a song that I love so much. It says, "The time we shared will always be." The time we shared will always be. And, you know, as I listen to you, I think it's very important that we put faces. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about them.
That's fine.
To put faces. I mean, people, you know, we get to a point in our nation and in our world where things happen to people, and it's like, it's just collateral damage. You know, it's like it's not a human being, like a family behind the people mourning, feeling sorrow, you know, and as I say, mourning for things that could have been.
Yes.
And so I just wanted to, I appreciate you all sharing. And we, again, there are definitely some problems here that we're going to try to solve. And I agree with the other side. I don't think to use the word political banter, I thought that was not appropriate. It's about trying to solve problems and trying to make it so, and I think this would be your aim of being here, trying to make sure this doesn't happen to somebody else's daughter.
Yes, sir.
Or somebody else's cousin or sister or friend or fiance. So, again, I want to thank you all for being here. And when you talk about your daughters, I can tell you when you put the personal side to it, I think it helps us when we're trying to resolve these problems to just keep in mind, you know, this is for two wonderful, awesome, Spitfire, as you said, young
probably
people.
Would have been friends.
Yes. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize myself. Again, I love Elijah Cummings, puts his heart into it and cares, and I think we all do. I don't think this is a partisan issue, but there are public policy issues that we have to deal with. And Mr. Root, I wanted to put up a picture, if it's all right with you, of Sarah. This is your daughter there. How long ago was that picture?
She graduated the 30th of January. She died January 31st. That night, or after graduation during the day, she went out with her mom and my mom's side of the family, and they had something to eat, and I was helping a friend do some work, and I asked if she wanted to have a steak and crab legs with us, but no, she wanted to go celebrate her graduation with a friend. And I had her in the driveway blocked in with my vehicle, and she moved her vehicle. I'm sorry, I moved my vehicle. I was parked behind her, and she parked her vehicle on the street. And she walked back up after parking her vehicle and hugged me and gave me a big old hug, and it was like a death hug. You know, she said, "I can't go nowhere without telling you I love you, Dad." And that's the last time I seen her alive before I identified her.